Hey, I'm Adam Jusko and this is Adam Answers. What is a cashier's check? Why would you want one? How do you get one? How does it work? We're going to cover all that. If you find this video helpful, give us a like, maybe subscribe. So a cashier's check is a check that you get from a bank, usually for large purchases, in order to verify that the funds are available to actually pay that check. It actually is a guaranteed check. It is actually written on the bank's bank account versus your own personal checking account. And because it is a verified sort of guaranteed check from the bank, it is almost the same as cash. So it can be a little bit dangerous and you have to be very careful with a cashier's check so that you do not lose it. All right, let's break that down further, and I'm going to take this from the perspective of you being the one that is potentially going to get a cashier's check from the bank. So normally if you have a checking account, that is a personal checking account. When you have paper checks, you can write out a paper check and give it to somebody else. And this is simply a trust situation where that person is trusting the fact that you have enough money in your bank account to cover that check. However, you don't necessarily have enough. You could have $2 in your bank account and write out a check for $75. That person is trusting you to have it, but they don't have a guarantee. A week later, they might find out that your check bounced and they aren't going to get that money from you. A cashier's check, on the other hand, does provide a guarantee because when you get a cashier's check, you have to go to the bank and you have them write out a check from their own account to the person that is getting the check for the amount that you want to give to that person. And you have to cover the cost of that check to the bank. So if you have a checking account with them, they're going to take that money out of your checking account, put it in theirs, and then they're going to be the one to write the check to that person. So it's almost like a prepaid check. It's not like the check shows up and then they find out if you have enough money or not. You have already paid for that check in advance. So when a person gets a cashier's check from you, they know that it is essentially like cash. It is already guaranteed that when they go to cash that check, they are going to get the money and it's not going to bounce. So let's talk about an example of when you might use a cashier's check, and then we'll talk about how you go about getting a cashier's check. So let's say you are buying a used car from a private owner and the cost of that car is $4,500. Well, you don't want to go to someone's house that you don't even know and have $4,500 of cash in order to pay for that car, right? You don't know if something might happen on the way there where something happens to that cash. Maybe you get there and the person robs you and you have no cash and you don't get any car at all. So what you do instead is you get that person's name and you go to the bank, you get a cashier's check written out to that person for that amount so that when you get there, you can give them that check and then you will get the car. So there's some security for you that you're not going to get robbed out of cash that can't be traced, and there's really nothing you can do about it if something bad happens. From the seller's end, they don't want to take a personal check from you, right? Because it could bounce, which means they could be out the money and out the car because you've already driven away with the car with a check that was no good. So if you give them a cashier's check, they know that is a guaranteed bank check. They are going to be able to take that to the bank and it is not going to bounce like your personal check might. And there are some extra security features built into a cashier's check, watermarks and other things to make sure that you cannot counterfeit it, or at least it is very, very difficult to counterfeit a cashier's check. Now, getting a cashier's check is pretty simple. You go to the bank or you go to the credit union and you tell them you want a cashier's check. They are going to ask you who is it being written out to and for how much money. You cannot have a blank cashier's check. You have to tell them who it is being written out to, either a person or business, and for exactly how much. Once they have that information, they're either going to pull that money out of your account that you have with them, or in some cases you would give them cash to cover the amount of the cashier's check. A cashier's check in some cases is going to be free. Sometimes you're going to have to pay a little bit, maybe up to like 15 bucks in order to get a cashier's check. Now, while a cashier's check does provide added security to a transaction for both the buyer and the seller, there is a danger in it for the person that is having the cashier's check made. Because you are putting money up front to get this guaranteed bank check, it is almost like a prepaid check, like a preloaded debit card is a way you could think of it. So you do not want to lose it because it is essentially like cash. If you lose a cashier's check, you can't just go to the bank and say, hey, put a stop payment on it. I lost it. The whole point of the cashier's check is that you can't stop payment on it. It is guaranteed to the person that you have written it to. So if you lose the check, the bank is going to say, well, if you want another check, you can pay a second time in order to get that second check, but they're not just going to write you a second one. And if you say, well, I don't want to do that, well, they're going to say, well, we're going to have to wait 90 days now to see if that check gets cashed because we don't know. Maybe you're trying to scam us. So you are going to be out that money for 90 days while they wait to see if that check gets cashed or not. So it's not a good situation to be in if you lose a cashier's check. So you have to be very, very careful once you have one made that it gets to its destination and it's only that person that gets their hands on it. So the bigger the purchase, the more it is going to make sense to use a cashier's check in a transaction, but the bigger the purchase, the more it is going to make sense to guard that cashier's check very closely so that it doesn't get lost and you lose that money or at least have to wait a very long time before you can get your hands on it again. Questions or comments, put them in that comments section below. Otherwise, I thank you for watching, and if this video was helpful, again, give us a like, maybe subscribe, and we'll talk to you again soon.